Hi and welcome to this presentation of Gemara Academy. Here we will go through an entire class as well as an assessment to see the various parts of each Gemara Academy class. So we begin over here, we go down to the main menu, and as we can see on the main menu there are 4 buttons on the bottom, and these are the 4 sections of every class, and we'll go through each of them. So we begin with the class outline. The class outline has 3 parts. Number 1, it shows the student the piece of Gemara with Nekodis, and it's in the same exact layout as the regular Gemara. Number 2, it shows the student the breakdown and structure of this class. So every question is in red, like red light, stop, we have a question. And in the structure, it'll define what type of question it is, whether it's a contradiction, a general difficulty, or an inquiry. Every answer is in green, like green light go, we answer the question. And every proof is in purple. Now this Gemara happens to be linear. We have a contradiction, on that we have an answer, and to that we have a proof. But sometimes over here in the structure, it'll branch out based on how the Gemara is organized and structured. And number 3, it shows the student the keywords, which are basically the words that indicate that this is a question, that the next section is an answer, and that the next section is a proof. And now you can go to each of these words to learn what they mean. So if you click on Uraminu, it'll tell you that it's a contradiction, what Kitanya he is, and what the Omar is. So that's the first section. We have the piece of Gemara with the Kudus, we have the breakdown and structure, and we have the keywords. The second section is the introduction class, and this basically presents the student with all the background information that he needs for this piece of Gemara. So for instance, if the Gemara says we learned something from a Kal V'chemer, a Gzeira Shava, a Hekesh, a Binyan Av, a Tzada Shava, it'll explain what those are. If the Gemara makes reference to Dalad Shemrim or Edim Zaymimim, any concept that's presented in the class will be explained over here. So in this instance, it's very brief. The Gemara makes reference to a group of people that are called Vasikin, and it's explained over here that these are basically people who seek to do mitzvahs in the best possible way. Then we move on now to the 3rd and 4th sections. So these are essentially the actual content of the class itself. These were preparatory elements. We saw a bird's eye view of the structure. Over here we got the background information. And over here we're going to get the actual content in 2 formats. The first one is outside, and it's called a flowchart class because it employs a flowchart. And this next section is a text class because it's seeing the Gemara inside the actual text itself. So let's start with the flowchart class. So the flowchart class has 3 parts. First, it shows the student what he learned already and what he's going to learn. Where is he coming from? Where is he going? So in this instance, where he's coming from is that the Mishnah taught that there's an argument regarding the time for Tefillah Shacharis, whether it's till Chatzais or whether it's till 4 hours in the day. And what we're going to learn here is, number 1, the Gemara will present as a contradiction to this from a Brisa, to both these opinions. We'll present an answer to the contradiction, and we'll have a proof to support the answer. And it mentions over here that this is the first of a series of questions on this teaching of the Mishnah. So in the next classes, we'll continue to further discuss this teaching up here. Now we move on to the actual content itself in the flowchart form. So the student is already familiar with this diagram here for the Mishnah. It reflects the opinions of the Tanakama and Rabbi Huda. And we have a contradiction from our Brisa that teaches that a person has to daven right at Neitz HaChama, and he doesn't have all this extra time. And the Gemara answers that Brisa is not referring to the time that a person has to daven, but just the time for Vasikin to daven. The Gemara brings a proof. Rabbi Yechanan said Vasikin would daven at this time, not everyone. And then we have a summary chart. So it comes out for the time of Shemona Esrei Shachris. We have 2 things. We have Vasikin and we have the Din. The Brisa teaches the time of a Vasikin, that's an Neitz HaChama, and the Mishnah teaches the time of the Din, and there we have an argument. Now in the flowchart itself, it appears in 2 formats. We have A and Aleph. A means that the titles are in English, contradiction, answer, proof. The words are in English, and if you're using the student version where there's audio, it'll fully explain what each of these points in the Gemara is making. So it'll elaborate on it and explain it in full. When you click on Aleph, all 3 of those things change. Number 1, the titles are no longer in English, but rather instead of contradiction, answer, and proof, it says stira, tiritz, raya. Number 2, the words are not in English, but rather it's every word in the Gemara, and instead of explaining it, it's an exact translation. So if we look over here, the Gemara has a tiritz, ki tanya hi levasikin. When was that Brisa taught? For the vasikin, for the devoted ones. And the idea over here is that it's sort of a bridge between seeing the Gemara outside, because we're still retaining the color coding and the structure of a flowchart, while at the same time the student is already being exposed to the actual words of the Gemara itself. And that brings us to the final section, which is the text class, where over here we have the actual text of the Gemara, the way it appears in a regular Gemara, and it's with Nekodis. And as we're going through it, we'll see that the translation comes up for each of these words as we're scrolling through it, and it also keeps the color coding, so the question is in red, the answer is going to be in green, and the proof will be in purple. So these are the different elements within the class itself. And just to mention that there's also a student version for all of this. So in the student version, you can actually click on a word, it'll take you there, and the translation bar wouldn't be there. But rather, if you click on the word a second time, it'll bring up this translation bar with an audio reading the word. So it'll say Raminu. The Gemara asks that there's a contradiction to this. And then we'll move on. It'll say it's brought down in a brisa, mitzvah say netzachama. Its mitzvah, meaning the mitzvah of Shema, is to be said with netzachama, and so on and so forth. So you'll have audio throughout the entire class in each of these 4 sections that we just went through. Now, corresponding to this class, every single class also has an assessment. So we can see that over here. We just did this piece of Gemara. You can see the way it looks. It's the class 2 quiz. So let's launch that. And as we'll see now, every assessment has 3 parts. So when you're learning Gemara, you essentially have to master 3 things. Number 1, the vocabulary of the Gemara. Number 2, the content of the Gemara. And number 3, the ability to break down the text of the Gemara. And as we'll see, every quiz has these 3 sections. So we start with the vocabulary. So here the student is prompted to match the words with their correct translation. So we'll get some of the questions right. This one we'll get entirely right, and we'll get some of them wrong. So we see how the assessment works. So we got this question right. We'll see over here on the top, I have 0 out of 130 points. It'll tell me that's right, you answered correctly. Now I have 10 out of 130 points because each question is 10 points and there are 13 questions. At the end of the quiz, it'll give me a percent total, not just a point total. Let's move on. The next question is also a vocabulary word. We'll get this one right as well. So I'll get up to 20 points now. That's right, you answered correctly, and we have 20 points. Now we'll move on to the next section, which is the understanding section. And here there's a different types of questions. There's more of a variety. So over here we have a multiple choice question. Which part of the Mishnah is the question connected to? If I pick Mincha instead of Shachris, you'll see the point total will stay at 20. And it'll tell me you did not choose the correct answer. The correct answer is the time of Shachris. The next question is a drag and drop. So here the student is prompted to fill in the blanks. So let's get it half right. Originally in the, I'll do maskana. We thought that the Brisa is teaching what is the time of Shachris for all people. Ultimately in the, and I'll put Havamina, we learned that the Brisa is teaching what is the time of Shachris for Vasikin. So I got maskana and Havamina incorrect. So I'm going to only get 5 points for this, so it goes from 20 to 25, and it tells me your answer was almost right. The correct answer is in the Havamina, all people, in the Maskana Vasikin. Then we'll have 2 sequencing questions. So the first one's in English, the next one is with the words of the Gemara. So I have to arrange the following items in the correct order. So they raise the contradiction. It's taught in a brisa, so that he joins and he has found when was the brisa taught. And then we have the same thing in the words of the Gemara, or Minu, mitzvah semenizachama, kadeshi simach kol tefillah. And we'll get that right as well. And then the last section is a text-based section. So here the student is prompted to click on the first and last word of the class. That's from here to here. Okay. Click on the first and last word of the question. That's from here to here. Now click on the first and last word of the brisa in the question. So let's get this wrong. I'll do mitzvasa until mispal instead of bayim. So it tells me your answer was almost right. The correct answer is mitzvasa on line 1, but bayim on line 2. Now the next question is a little difficult. Click on the only word in the question that is in Aramaic. So the question's from here to here, the brisa is from here to here. The brisa is all in Lashon HaKodesh, so the only word in Aramaic is Uriminu. If I want, I could also clear the buttons, the hotspots, and do it over. Click on the first and last word of the answer, and then finally click on the first and last word of the proof. And then the last question is always the same. The student is prompted to complete the sentence. The words in our Gemara are from where? And you'll always have 3 options. I'll click on all 3, even though there are no psukim, and we'll get the answer. Your answer was almost right. The correct answer is Tanaim Amoraim, and it explains. Psukim, there are no psukim quoted in our Gemara. Tanaim, the brisa quoted in the question are the words of Tanaim. Amoraim, the rest of our Gemara are the words of Amoraim. And the point of this question is to emphasize to the student that the Gemara is only and exclusively the words of Amoraim. And if there are any psukim or Tanaim, it's because they are being quoted by the Amoraim in their discussion. They'll bring a question from a Mishnah or from a brisa. They'll bring down a pasuk to challenge something that was taught or to support something that was taught. But the Gemara itself is the discussion and the talking of the Amoraim, and they are quoting in their discussion these psukim and tanaim. And then when you get the results, you get 2 things. So besides the general result, so you see that congratulations, you passed. The passing score was 80. I got up just above an 80. But you'll also see a section-based results. So how did I do on vocabulary, on understanding, and on the text? And then you can review the quiz as well and go through it, see what you did right, what you did wrong, what the correct answer is, and so on and so forth. And for teachers, they're able to run reports and see on the reports how the students did, both section-based as well as individual questions as well.